Liz Stratton holds an undergraduate degree in biological sciences from Smith College in Northampton, Massachusetts, and a master's degree in marine sciences from Boston University's marine program in Woods Hole, Massachusetts. After many years in the field, she landed a shoreside job as the assistant marine mammal stranding coordinator for the Southeast region with NOAA Fisheries. That expertise, along with knowledge gained during oil spill and hurricane responses, allows Liz to fill the role of Gulf of Mexico Marine Mammal Disaster Response Coordinator, a position fashioned to help increase the readiness of the Marine Mammal Stranding Network in the Gulf, to create ties and open communications between agencies, and to increase the visibility of marine mammal issues in the response community. Come on up, Liz.
So my name is Liz Stratton. I am the Gulf of Mexico Marine Mammal Disaster Response Coordinator, which is a big mouthful, but we couldn't really figure out how to describe it better any other way. If any of you are familiar with my name, I have probably harassed you in the past or asked you for things. I was here for Texas City Y, making a nuisance of myself, so feel free to send me an email at any time. I should put I've got a card. If you need my email address, I'm always happy to take questions about what we're doing for response, or also my counterpart, one of my counterparts is here, but I'll introduce her. All right, so I don't want to steal too many other people's thunder here, but just briefly to talk about some of the toxic effects of oil on marine mammals is a good place to start. You'll get in more information on this a little bit later from different speakers, but a good place to start because it sort of sets up the question for why do we care, right? Of course, dolphins are adorable and whales are super cool and manatees are, ugly but sweet, and, so we care about all these things. But really we need to we're starting to get at what does this mean for marine mammal response. So two big pathways, external, internal, and keep in mind that while I've got dolphin pictures up here, we are talking about lots of different groups of marine mammals. So you've got your cetaceans, you've got your pinnipeds, not here, we hope ever, but also manatees, and so they're going to be affected in different ways for some of these pathways, and some of these pathways are going to be the same. So we've got external, which is going to, affect thermoregulation for some animals. For some animals, it's going to be irritation. For some animals, it's going to change their energy efficiency. And we've got internal exposure, whether that's inhalation, aspiration, ingestion. All of those things are going to cause a cascade of different problems that, like I said, you'll be hearing about in a little while. Okay, so the vagueness of some oil spill planning has sort of set us back on our heels a little bit. The main legislation for current response is the Oil Pollution Act of 1990. We call it Open 90 because the other one's too long to say. And that says that your ACP, your Area Contingency Plan, which is put together with stakeholders and the Coast Guard, is going to minimize disruptions to fish and wildlife and their habitats. Great, thanks. How do we do that specifically? That's where we get to guidelines. Also the NCP requirement, that's the National Contingency Plan, which is a national document that deals with disaster response. Same thing. So we have this charge. How do we fulfill it? How do we fulfill it for marine mammals? One of the kickers here is that historically, possibly because they're the most obvious and the most immediate, a lot of wildlife response has been bird-centric. So there are fantastic groups out there that have everything ready to go and all their own guidelines and protocols for bird response, and mammals were just taking a little bit of time to catch up. So what do we need for wildlife response? Oh, nothing much, just everything. So we need all of the structure. We need to figure out what the resources are, personnel, material, where is it going to come from, who's going to pay for it, and are we allowed to do what we're doing? So that's going to count all of your permitting and approvals. Some of the marine mammals that we're dealing with are endangered species. They have a whole separate authorization for responding to them and dealing with them and mitigating damage to them. So These are all things that we have to consider while we're making a plan. And then also on top of that, what are your procedures going to be? Like, how are you actually going to go A, B, C, D through this? And we have those broken down into primary, secondary, and tertiary response activities. So I tend to think of this as get the oil out, keep anybody else from getting oiled, and do the best you can to help anything that was oiled. So your primary is going to be things like oil recovery. That doesn't just count oil itself, it also counts oiled carcasses. There are predation issues. You've got a dead dolphin or a whale on the beach. It's going to be predated upon by birds, by small wild animals. We've had coyotes. So you need to remove those carcasses to keep from getting secondary oiling issues with your wildlife. So that's why carcass recovery is really important, and that's why that's part of response. Your secondary response are things like deterrence and hazing. How do we keep animals from getting near the oil in the first place? This is something that we're putting a lot of thought into. Obviously, keeping an animal from getting oiled is way better than cleaning it later. So, but you know, marine mammals are wily and crafty, and they don't always listen to when we tell them, don't go here. Just kidding. If we had a marine mammal psychic, maybe that would help. And then recovery and rehab. So we've got a whole bunch of people to help us with this big task. And here they are. So this is the Southeast Region Stranding Network. They are either given a permit by NOAA to do marine mammal stranding response, or they're considered, we call them 109H because of the provision in the Marine Mammal Protection Act. Those are state agencies, parks, stuff like that. In the normal course of their duties, they are permitted to do stranding response. As you can see, we've got a whole bunch in Florida and a few less in other places, but we're working on capacity, and Heidi, who you'll hear from later, is our big player in Texas, and she is, you know, we're working together as we are working with all of our Stranding Network members to get into our full capacity, shall we say. Okay, so if we're talking procedures, we need guidelines, we need a document, we need something written down. What does that look like? In the beginning, in the dark ages, in 2005, we had a document, and it was pretty good. You know, it covered a few things that we knew about from previous oil spills, and it was written by, you know, oil response folks for marine mammals and pinnipeds, and it was what we had at the time, and it was pretty good. And we had a final document in 2007. We did a road show, there was training, lots of people got to read it and use it and be trained on it. We had oil spill drills, and we had a big oil spill drill in April of 2010 to sort of work through those procedures in that program. And then that happened, right, I think a few days after the drill, which was like, okay, so this is not a drill. Let's put these guidelines into place. This is how you continually improve things. So, somebody famous, actually he's not all that famous, but the saying is famous, no battle plan survives first contact with the enemy. So, there was the enemy, there was our plan, and it needed help, it needed improvement. So, we're still working through that. Some of the things that it needed more of was cetacean response. That was something that we were, you know, still figuring out, and we didn't have a lot of experience with necessarily. And so we realized we needed a little more of that. And so we started revising. We were revising after Deepwater Horizon. So after Deepwater, everybody got together and brainstormed and made a bunch of recommendations about how to improve the guidelines. So we needed some refinement of our wildlife protocols. We needed what we called reality-based chain of custody and sampling, which basically means when you're in the field and in the lab, you need a set of procedures that you can follow that are going to give you the best science in the most efficient way. So we needed better sampling protocols, field procedures. We needed to cover all of our marine mammals. And also we wanted to increase communication between different Stranding Network members and different regions. So I showed you a map of the Southeast. There are other regions. All the regions of the US have their own Stranding Network members. And during Deepwater, we did call in. We called for reinforcements, and some folks from Pacific Islands came, folks from the Southwest region came, and we realized that our Southeast network wasn't familiar with some of these folks, and it felt a little bit like strangers coming in to tell you what to do, which wasn't how that was meant to be. It was meant to be support. So as we have our network meetings, our national network meetings, we've been working to get everybody to get to know each other so that we can support each other. And then also, we needed to work through some facility readiness and work on material. That was a big issue, was that we were having a hard time getting what we needed in time during the spill response. So, there's some stuff missing up there. So we came up with a plan. Everybody needs a plan. The plan is we're going to debrief from Deepwater, we're going to update the national guidelines, and we're going to develop regional plans. So different places have different needs, different ecotypes, and their facilities and personnel are different. So let's take the national guidelines, let's zoom in a little bit on each region and work through what that region might need or have that's different from other places. Then we're going to do an annex, which is a more living document, which is going to be updated more frequently, that has phone numbers and what you have at your place and what you need. And those are all going to support each other in a tiered planning. And then drill, right? Use your plan, exercise it, familiarize people with it, so then when the proverbial hits the fan, people know what page to go to, they know who to call, and they know how they're going to get through it. Oh, here we go. Oh yeah, and then Texas City Y also helped us update our plan. Okay, so the guidelines, like I've been saying, the guidelines are a foundation, and they are something to work through. They're establishing communication protocols. It's really easy in the heat of the moment to forget how you're supposed to work through something, or who you're supposed to call, or who has that piece of information that you need. So we have it all written down in one place. And everybody can use it. They help standardize, this is really important, they help standardize all of our sample collection protocols so that what you're doing, so that you're not at any point comparing apples to oranges. You're sampling everybody across, for Deepwater, we had multiple Stranding Network members taking samples. You need to make sure they're all comparable to each other. So for Texas, luckily, Heidi ran the show there, and everything was the same, and that was a perfect model for how we're going to, how we move forward to make sure everyone's on the same page. So all the sampling, all the chain of custody protocols, having everyone use the same forms, having everybody be on the same page. And when we do this, we're getting the best achievable care, and we're getting the best achievable science. Who wants to read it? I don't know. It's 70 pages. Who should read it? Anybody who wants to. Anybody who's going to be working through this. Are you a responder? Are you cleanup? Are you Coast Guard? Are you parks? Who are you? I don't know. We can all read it. We can all benefit from it. It's going to be kind of dense for some people, but I think taking a look at it, at least to familiarize yourself with, what's going to happen when the next thing comes around, or, if somebody says, hey, Southwest region, I could use a hand in my Southeast region with this spill that we have, then, whoever that is can read it on the plane on the way over and have a sense of what's happening. When you write something down, it has more power than it does if you don't have it written down. So when we're using these guidelines, once they are established, we can help use that to make other plans make other guidelines, and move forward in different regions. So these guidelines are going to help modify the area contingency plans that the regional groups are making under the aegis of the Coast Guard. So our response guidelines can help move us forward in that way, which means maybe that means better or different notification. Maybe that means a different setup in the command center in the middle of a spill, that you're establishing that ahead of time. It's also helping us set up the protocols for all of this ephemeral data. We're collecting data as part of response, but that response is going to inform the damage assessment. And when you're doing that right out of the gate and you're doing it consistently, then that is a huge boon to the damage assessment. And you'll hear a little bit more about the damage assessment later. The guidelines are not final. They are a living document. We will be continuing to update them. Every time we drill, every time we have an event, it's going to make a difference. We're going to find things that we need to add or refine or define. And so that's, I think we're on a couple of year plan, maybe a 5-year plan to just continue updating these documents. And then when I was discussing the regional plans, those are going to be updated more frequently. This is the current format of the guidelines. In case you're wondering what's in there without reading all 60 or 70 pages, this is mostly it. So it'll walk you through the legal framework, which is super dry and boring, so you just skip that part. And then the really interesting stuff to me, because I'm a super nerd about this, is response. But how your notification tree is going to go, ICS, Incident Command Structure, I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. That's a class that you can take on FEMA's website. It is super helpful during an oil spill. Wildlife Branch Overview. Traditionally, NOAA has been placed in the environmental unit of the Incident Command Structure, which is great, but we find that when we're doing response, that operations is really where we want to be, and that's laid out in this document. And also, where it says group activities is a breakdown of sort of your strike teams, who's going to do recovery and what is that going to look like, who's going to do processing and what is that going to look like, so that, like I said, so everybody's on the same page. Network members and others are broken down into these organization types. That's also enumerated in the document, what this means for each of these types of response. And network members or other groups, parks, wildlife departments, natural resources, they may be able to offer personnel or boats. They're maybe not going to go rehabilitate a dolphin, but they can be included in this plan and then designated as, what they can do to help. And then one of the things that we are doing continually as we're updating and as we're working through this plan is we're thinking about these readiness questions. What does this mean to all of the organizations to be a part of this plan? Like, are you zoned for what you want to do? Do you have enough people? Are your people trained all to the same standards and all to the same standards as everyone else? Are you able and willing to work under the unified command of the incident command structure? That means that you may be running your facility in a different way than you might in a non-oil spill situation. You got to be willing to do it. And then are you willing to keep working on readiness activities? Keep yourself up to date, keep your people trained. We need HAZWOPER, right? If you're gonna respond in an oil spill environment, you need hazardous work operations, I think that's the R part. And it's a 40-hour or a 24-hour training, and you need to refresh yourself with an 8-hour course every single year. And it costs money. So if you find that your group has sort of, lost its training currency, then if the thing happens tomorrow, you're not going to be ready. So these are all things you have to be willing to undertake to be part of the plan. And these are the goals. These are the goals that the plan is working for, that we're all working towards. The IPIECA used to stand for International Petroleum Industry Environmental Conservation something, but they dropped that, and now they just call themselves like the industry group that promotes, I don't know, as good as we can get, helping everything as much as we can. And they have documented wildlife response guidelines on their website, which you can download, which are actually really informative. And these are their watchwords, right? What are the things that we're working towards with industry and network and stakeholders and everybody else? What are the things that we're working towards? Cooperation, collaboration, the best achievable science, and an integrated effort, and the best possible results. So I think that that's a good thing to think about as we're all moving forward, that we're all in this together. And then this is us. If you don't want to write this down, you can actually just Google oil spill response guidelines NOAA, and I think it'll take you there. And it's, like I said, it's a pretty big document, but it's really informative. There's a lot of great information in there. We're currently writing the Gulf of Mexico regional guidelines, and we're hoping that those will be out in the next year or so, and that will be a more detailed look at the groups in the region, what everyone's capacity is, and things that are specific to the Gulf itself. And that's it. That's my last slide. Does anybody have any questions? I didn't keep track of the time.
No, you're perfect. But I forgot to mention earlier that we're going to have our Q&A panel after all the speakers have been up. And if there's time, we'll ask questions right after presentations. But we are 2 minutes behind. And our next speaker is actually joining us remotely from California. So you're going to watch us try to plug her in for a minute. So just hang in there while we call her and get her hooked up to our system.
Are you good? She should be already on the line.
Well, I don't want to open up the line to everyone. So remember, we're going to.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I'm not seeing her on the,
No, she hung up the phone.
but she's not showing up on the
Okay.
WebEx.
Are you on the WebEx? Or she says she's on there.
Oh, there she is.
Hey, okay.
She's perfect.
1 second, Mary.